Some stories fade with time. This one didn't. It was a humid September morning in 1934 when two young boys wandered down to the base of Jackass Hill, a small bluff overlooking the east side of Cleveland. What they found wasn't something you forget. It wasn't something you talk about easily either. There, lying partially buried near a bramble of weeds, was a man's torso. No limbs. No head. Just a clean, surgically severed torso. Pale. Bloodless. It would be another 3 days before police found the rest of him. His lower half was wrapped in newspaper and dumped in a vacant lot not far from the East 20th rail yards. The body was never identified. The newspapers called him the tattooed man because of the ink on his shoulder. But that ink didn't bring answers. Only more questions. Over the next 4 years, Cleveland would come face to face with something it had no name for. Something brutal. Something precise. Something cold. The city would uncover the remains of at least 12 more victims. Each one mutilated in ways the coroner said could only have been done by someone with anatomical knowledge, someone who understood how to take a body apart like it was a machine. Heads severed cleanly, torsos drained of blood, bodies burned with chemicals, and most horrifying of all, most of these victims were never identified. No families claimed them. No names. No faces. Just numbers. These were the forgotten people. Victims of the Great Depression, men and women trying to survive in the shadows of soup kitchens, under bridges, in the freight yards. And whoever the killer was, he knew that no one would miss them right away. Police called him the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run. The papers fed the frenzy. But behind the headlines was a case so frustrating, so disturbing, it would haunt the city for generations. At the center of it all, a man once hailed as a national hero. Eliot Ness. Yes, that Eliot Ness. The same lawman who helped take down Al Capone in Chicago. By 1935, he had taken on a new title, Cleveland's public safety director. But when the torso killings landed on his desk, he quickly realized this wasn't like anything he'd faced before. Ness tried everything. Raids, surveillance, interrogations. He even burned down the shanty towns in a desperate move to root out the killer. But the murders didn't stop. They just got closer, more personal. Eventually, Ness would interrogate a suspect, a brilliant but deeply troubled surgeon named Dr. Francis E. Sweeney. Ness believed he had his man, but he couldn't prove it. Sweeney was committed to a mental institution and never charged. And then, the killings stopped. Just like that. No farewell. No signature. Just silence. For decades, the case remained untouched, boxed up, filed away. A ghost story told in backrooms and late-night police patrols. But what if it wasn't over? What if pieces were still missing? Buried in the archives, in the alleyways, in the stories no one bothered to write down? And what if this wasn't just a story of a killer, but of a city that chose to forget? This is the true story of Cleveland's most gruesome cold case. A mystery that left bodies in its wake, and questions no one could answer. This is the case of the torso murders, unveiled. The first victim wasn't even called by his name, because no one knew it. He had no ID, no family that came forward, no known address. The coroner simply called him John Doe. The press called him the tattooed man. But all that really mattered was that he had been methodically dismembered, head and limbs removed with precision, his torso scrubbed clean, drained of blood like something out of a medical textbook. Just a few months later, another body turned up. This one was different. It was a woman. Her skin was rough, her limbs severed cleanly again. They called her the Lady of the Lake. And she, too, had no head. Her remains were found just a short walk from where the first torso had been discovered. Now police knew. This wasn't random. Someone was watching. Waiting. Picking people off the streets like they were invisible. And the killer knew it would be days, sometimes weeks, before anyone would even notice they were gone. By early 1935, the city couldn't ignore what was happening. 2 bodies became 3. 3 became 5. Police began connecting the dots. These weren't isolated cases. This was a pattern. A brutal one. And there was something else. Every victim showed signs of post-mortem mutilation. Bones cut through clean. Muscles exposed. In some cases, the heads were never recovered. Investigators started whispering about a medical background. Maybe someone who had worked in a morgue. A butcher, a surgeon, someone who knew how to disassemble a body without hesitation. But whoever it was, he wasn't sloppy. He wasn't careless. And he was choosing people who had no one to speak for them. It was around this time that a new figure stepped into the picture. Eliot Ness. To many, he was a household name, famous for cleaning up Chicago's corrupt streets during Prohibition. But in Cleveland, he was facing something else entirely. Not gangsters, not politicians, but a faceless killer who seemed to operate without fear and with precision. Ness didn't waste time. He ramped up patrols, ordered shantytowns to be swept. Investigators combed through the rail yards, the alleys, the sewers. But the killer was always one step ahead. And then, just when things couldn't get any darker, more victims surfaced. Victim number 6, a man. Dismembered. Stuffed into baskets. His torso found inside a burlap sack near a slaughterhouse. Number 7, an unidentified woman with her skin chemically burned, as if someone was trying to hide their mistakes. At this point, it wasn't just a case anymore. It was a crisis. The city was scared. Reporters hounded the police for answers. People started carrying whistles, walking in pairs, refusing to go out after dark. But no matter how loud the panic grew, the butcher stayed silent. And yet, the bodies kept coming. By the summer of 1936, the city of Cleveland was unraveling. 5 more victims. 5 more stories that would never be told. The bodies had started appearing faster, closer together. Sometimes just weeks apart. The killer wasn't slowing down. He was getting bolder. At a time when the rest of America was scraping to survive the Great Depression, Cleveland had a different kind of terror. And Eliot Ness was in the middle of it. Appointed as public safety director just a year earlier, Ness had cleaned up the corrupt police department, introduced modern crime labs, and helped cut down mob activity. But now, his reputation and his sanity were being tested by someone he couldn't see, couldn't predict, couldn't stop. Desperate, Ness began ordering raids on the shantytowns that had grown in the ravines of Kingsbury Run. Whole communities of homeless men and women were rounded up, questioned, sometimes beaten, and eventually burned out. Ness ordered the camps torched. Publicly, it was called a cleanup. Privately, it was a warning. It didn't work. That same year, 2 more victims were found in plain sight, right beneath the busy Superior Avenue Bridge. This wasn't hidden anymore. The killer was leaving pieces where people had to find them, as if he was taunting the city, as if he was taunting Ness. And then came a letter, an anonymous note mailed directly to Eliot Ness. It wasn't a confession, but it might as well have been. It hinted at details that hadn't been released to the press. It mocked the investigation. And worse, it claimed there were more victims that the public would never find. The letter pushed Ness to do something he hadn't done before. He narrowed his focus to one man, Dr. Francis Edward Sweeney. A former World War I field surgeon, Sweeney knew how to cut. He knew how to handle a body. After the war, he worked in veterans' hospitals, but struggled with alcoholism and mental illness. He was erratic, angry, at times completely incoherent. But there was something else, something that made Ness even more suspicious. Dr. Sweeney had close ties to one of Ness's political rivals. If Ness pushed too hard, it could backfire. And still, he had to try. Ness had Sweeney brought in, discreetly. No booking, no press, just a private interrogation. Sweeney was given a polygraph test. Experts said he showed extreme deception. But at the time, lie detectors weren't admissible in court. Ness had no confession, no body, no witness, just a gut instinct. And yet, just days after the interrogation, the killing stopped. Did Sweeney know he was caught? Did Ness threaten him into silence? Or was it just coincidence? Sweeney was never arrested. Instead, he voluntarily committed himself to a mental hospital. For the rest of his life, he would remain there, in and out of institutions. A ghost in a padded room. Ness would never publicly name him. But privately, he always said it was him. But if Dr. Francis Sweeney was the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, why couldn't they prove it? Why did the killings, so gruesome, so frequent, stop just as suddenly as they began? And was Cleveland ever really safe again? After nearly 4 years of horror, blood, and headlines, the killing stopped. No final message. No grave confession. No last victim left in plain view. Just silence. It was as if the killer had evaporated. Or, as many suspected, had finally been cornered. But without a name on the record, without a charge filed, the story never felt finished. For Eliot Ness, the case would never go away. Publicly, he moved on. He helped reshape Cleveland's safety systems, implemented reforms, and cleaned up corruption. But behind closed doors, he carried the weight of failure. This one case, the one that mattered most, was the one he couldn't close. Years later, In private letters, Ness would confess what many had long suspected. He was convinced the killer had been Dr. Francis Sweeney. But Sweeney had powerful connections. His cousin was a political heavyweight in the city. Any public accusation, Ness believed, could trigger a scandal big enough to crush not just his own career, but the city's entire leadership structure. So, he stayed silent. Still, strange things continued to happen. Sweeney, years after being institutionalized, sent Ness postcards. Cryptic, mocking messages. Sometimes unsigned. Sometimes referencing details only the killer could have known. Ness never responded. He simply kept them, locked away, until his death. By the 1950s, the torso case had become something of an urban legend. Parents used it to scare children indoors. Older cops told the story like a warning. Young detectives would pull the files from storage and stare at the photos, looking for something everyone else had missed. They never found it. In all, 12 confirmed victims. Some say it was more. Others insist the real number is closer to 20. Most were never named. Their families never found. Their stories cut off, literally and figuratively, by a man who seemed to vanish into thin air. And to this day, no one has been charged. Maybe it was Sweeney. Maybe it wasn't. But what we do know is that something dark walked through Cleveland in the 1930s. And it knew how to disappear. 80 years later, the city still remembers. The headlines still echo. And in the back corners of police archives, the case file still sits. Waiting. Some killers are caught. Some cases are closed. But this one never truly ended. The Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run walked away without a name. Without justice. And maybe that's the part that stays with you. The silence. The unfinished story. The possibility that the answers were always there, just out of reach. Was Dr. Francis Sweeney the man behind the scalpel? Or did Cleveland let the real killer slip through their fingers? What do you believe? Leave your theory in the comments below. We read every one of them. And if you've heard of a cold case that still keeps you up at night, tell us. We might cover it next. If you found this story haunting, share it. If you want more of these forgotten cases brought to light, hit subscribe. And if you think the truth matters, even after all these years, turn on the bell so you don't miss what comes next. Because sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried. It just waits.